So if you were speaking to a young college kid, what's the best way that would yield them the best return from an investment standpoint?
I think sports is a totally fascinating industry at this stage. It's much more mature than when I got involved 35 plus years ago. That having been said, you got to follow your heart. That's the key to life. And I think it's really the key to loving what you do.
Stack my money up like Legos. Back me when I say so. Pull up in the spotlight. Pull up in the drive.
What's up, world? It's your boy Ross Mack, and this is another episode of Money, Music, Culture. And you already know I'm sitting here with my dog, my brother, my right hand, Brandon Copeland. How you living, gang?
I'm chilling, baby. Chilling.
You already know. Without further ado, man, we got an amazing episode because we sitting here with a actual sports owner, a franchise owner. We sitting here talking with Jeff Moorad, former CEO of the Arizona Diamondbacks. And then he like, you know what, man, let me go ahead and get my sports league investment fund called MSP Sports Capital. And guess what? They literally just bought Formula One team. This is the Monte Carlo of sports racing. This is real stuff right here. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get right to it.
What's up, world? It's your boy Brandon Copeland, aka Professor Cope, and I am here with my brother, my dog. We're in person, Ross Mack.
Let's do it.
How are you doing, man? First and
Doing
foremost.
phenomenal. Let's go, baby.
Awesome. But more importantly, we have the pleasure and the opportunity, and we're honored that Mr. Jeff Moorad would take the time to sit down with us and have a conversation. And so, forget how he's doing. First, how are you doing on this beautiful day?
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's good to be with both of you, and we're looking forward to a fun conversation.
100%. And so just to completely dive in head first, right? I want you to introduce, because we had a little conversation off camera here, give you guys a little TV magic, but I want you to introduce yourself and what you do to the audience, because one, you do so many things, and we always balance, like, what do we say, what we don't say, right? But what do you do, and what are you proud of in your career?
That's a great question. Not exactly sure where to start, but I'll dive in like you. Look, I'm one of the lucky guys. I've got to be in the sports industry my whole career. I was educated as a lawyer a long time ago. Practiced law for about 6 months, and that's about all I could handle. And I said, you know what, I'm gonna go follow my passion. What was in my heart was the idea of getting involved in the sports industry. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but at the time, the only thing that they couldn't tell me I couldn't do was to go represent athletes. Because I figured, you know what, in order to legitimize yourself in that world, what do you need? You need a client. And if I go get a client, nobody can tell me I can't do it. Yeah. So I ended up, I got lucky, put together a small baseball practice, about 20 players. First player I ever represented was the first pick in the draft, and
wow.
What they called the January baseball draft. And it was a draft for community college players or players who had been drafted in June and went back into the draft. And in January of '84, I represented a kid named Calvin Jones who played at Verbum Day High School in Los Angeles, which was a great athletic high school. Players like David Greenwood and Roy Hamilton came out of that high school and went on to become big stars at UCLA. Calvin Jones had gone to a community college out in San Bernardino and became a client of mine. He ended up having about a 6-year career in the big leagues, and I'll give a shout out to him. He passed away this year.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And was just a great man. He became a great scout. He actually signed Clayton Kershaw for the Dodgers.
Wow.
Has a great legacy as a scout, which I was really proud of. Talked to him probably a week before he passed, and it was a poignant moment for me because that's where it all started. And he used to tease me. He used to say, I used to always tell people that he was my first client, and then he started telling people that he was my first client. I was kind of embarrassed that he knew that.
Right.
And as the years went on, he started bragging about it himself, which was kind of cool. In any case, I ended up meeting up with Lee Steinberg in 1984, 85, And we became partners. We were together for 18 years and represented players. I'm giving you a long answer, I know,
No,
but
that's what it's for.
and
Literally.
we ended up having the largest NFL practice in the U.S. For the 18 years that we were together. Firm was called Steinberg and Moorad, and I had a personal practice, which was the second largest baseball practice in the country, for probably 15 years, and loved the work, loved the deal making. I'm a deal guy, and being able to negotiate deals, 24/7 was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And we were blessed with some unbelievable clients. We had 25 quarterbacks. Guys like Aikman, Moon, and Young, and so far. I mean, just it was never ending, and it was every year at the Pro Bowl it was a packed house, and probably had 10 players, 12 players a year in the Pro Bowl. Some great photos over the years. But I always talk to my players about second career, and I found myself as I was approaching age 50, kind of looking myself in the mirror, saying, "Is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? Represent players?" And the answer was, as kind of clarity set in, was not really. It's like what I really desired was to be a principal in sports, and I wasn't sure if that was possible. Coming from the agent side, where everybody kind of, they shake your hand and they're nice to you, but they really don't like you, right? So I thought, well, you know what, I'm gonna keep my head down, and we had the benefit of selling 3 businesses over the years. We started an early internet business with athletes called Athlete Direct, which we sold to Sequoia Capital and IVP, which is now Red Point Ventures, and we sold a marketing firm to Bob Sillerman when he was rolling up the SFX grouping of agencies, and we sold our core business to a company called Asante up in Canada. So I had a little capital of my own, and I started dreaming, and I've always dreamt big, and I dreamed about the idea of becoming an owner in sports.
Listen up real quick. If you like what you hear, make sure you go share this with a friend. Tell them they can find Money Music Culture on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on YouTube. Now, let's get back into the show.
For me, I wasn't sure which sport it'd be. Actually, a buddy of mine and I put a bid in to buy an NHL club. I looked at an NBA team with Joe Lacob before he bought the Warriors, and at the end of the day, I got a very fortunate break. I got an opportunity to become the CEO and a general partner in the Arizona Diamondbacks. So I went over to Arizona. I ran the team there for about 4.5 years. Great experience. For me, it was kind of my business school education, which I'd never gotten. And learned on the job, and it took me a while, but I kind of figured out the pulse of the business on that side of the table, and I enjoyed it. I used to tell my GM every year, I said, just give me one player deal to do a year. Like, that's all I want to do. I just want to have a little fun. And so I'd take, sometimes I'd take the more challenging agents, and sometimes I'd take one that I'd known for a long time. But it didn't matter. I enjoyed at least keeping my fingers in that side of the business. But I loved the business, and I loved the idea of kind of all the different pieces of running a franchise, which I didn't know. I had an idea about them, but I really knew the player side. I didn't know all the other pieces of running a business like that. So it was a great career step for me, and kind of took all the bullets from everybody who said, I can't believe this guy's on our side, and the player side was mad at me, and everybody was mad, and I just kept my head down and said, look, I'm going to do what I came here for, which is to do the right things and make the right kinds of decisions. And we took a team that was, the worst in baseball when I got there in 2004. We ended up with the first draft pick in the country, and we drafted Justin Upton, who has had a great career. But we took that team, and 2.5 years later, we were the best team in the National League. And pretty excited. We won the division in 2007. We almost won it in 2008. My former client, Manny Ramirez, who the Dodgers traded for, came in and beat us in the last week.
Wow.
So, that's the way it goes. But anyway, I then moved on and I put a small group together and bought half the San Diego Padres in 2009 and had a great time in San Diego. It's probably my career highlight to date because the learning experience that I had in Arizona, I didn't need in San Diego. And so I got there, I took one employee with me from Arizona. It was Tom Garfinkel, who's now the CEO of the Miami Dolphins. And he and I went into San Diego. We knew exactly what we needed to do. We changed out 18 of the 30 members of the leadership team in the first 3 months. Not easy, kind of changing people's lives, but we knew we had a strong point of view as to what we needed, and we put the business on a track that we were comfortable with. And we sold the team about 3.5 years later. And since then, I've focused on my real passion, which is at this stage of my life, which is disciplined investing in the sports ecosystem. So we have a platform called MSP Sports Capital, and we invest in teams, leagues, and businesses in the sports ecosystem. So that's probably the longest answer you ever got, but happy to give it, and good to be here.
Yeah, listen, I mean, everybody's here to hear your story, right? So we appreciate that. And before I let you dive in with a question, you mentioned the word passion a few times, right? And, it's interesting to hear you say that because you talk about even in law school or after practicing law for 6 months, you decided, hey, let me follow my passion, and clearly it's worked out for you. Can you talk about what sacrifices you made while following that passion? Because I think that, when you look at society, a lot of times it's like, okay, I'm gonna follow my passion, but can you describe your work ethic behind it? Can you describe some of the things that people don't necessarily see and why following your passion actually worked out for you, in the long run?
Yeah, look, I mean, I don't know how much luck was involved. For sure there was some, but, I kind of threw caution to the wind and said, this is what I want to do. And, I had a conservative dad who's, not with us anymore, but at the time, he said, look, I'll support you. He ended up loaning me $10,000 at one point. And, and I launched my sports career, with nothing other than a confidence that I could go out and do things that others couldn't. And I'll never forget, I told you that Calvin Jones story. Years later, Calvin told me there were like 40 agents that were trying to represent him. I mean, this was a long time ago. Today, 40 agents chase, the backup defensive back on the Tampa Bay Bucks, right? Back then, 40 agents was like, I was like, oh my God, I'm glad he didn't tell me that at the time, right? And he told me that one of the people that was involved was Lee Steinberg. I'm like, who ended up being my partner for 18 years. I'm like, why didn't you hire Lee Steinberg? He said, listen, I believed in you. I believed in the passion that you talked to, there I say it again, but the passion that you talked to me about, wanting to represent me and wanting to be more than just an agent, but to be a friend. And sure enough, I was a friend for the rest of his life. And, it's like, I didn't know it would play out that way, right? But that's what I believed was possible. So for me, kind of following my heart was what drove me to the business. And you talk about sacrifice. Like I tell young people this all the time, who have aspirations of getting involved in sports, and I don't know whether I want to work for a team or work for a league, or and they tell me all these things. And students that I teach at UCLA in their business school, I have this conversation with them often. And I say, listen, I made $4,500 the first year in the business. And that was largely the fee on Calvin Jones' contract.
Wow.
That's it. Second year, I had a big year. I bumped it up to about 7,000. And I'll never forget, it's like I bought this Eastern Airlines ticket. and at the time, Eastern Airlines you've never heard of because they've been out of business for years. But as they were going out of business or about to, they sold these like unlimited stop tickets for 30 days, where maybe it cost $500, which was a lot of money back then. And I was literally on fumes. I was on my last dollars, and I created this like itinerary that had about 14 stops over the course of a month, and I went on various stops to recruit young baseball players. And one of the stops I made was at Mississippi State in Starkville, Mississippi. And, literally, with no idea how it was going to turn out. And I met with these two young players, a guy named Will Clark, who ended up having a 16-year career in the big leagues. And matter of fact, his number's getting retired in San Francisco in the near term. But another player named Rafael Palmeiro, who ended up hitting 500 home runs over the course of his career. And I went into the baseball coach's office at Mississippi State. I didn't know where I was. Never been to Mississippi before. I'm like, I had no clue how this is going to turn out. And I sat in the baseball coach's office and interviewed with both of them. And they were supposed to go 1-2 in the draft. They ended up going 2. Clark went 2, and then Rafael ended up falling to somewhere in the early 20s. But I signed them both. And, my resume was nothing. It was Calvin Jones and a lot of wishful thinking, basically. And, it was having the, I guess the strength to know that I didn't have the financials to be able to continue for much longer. But I believed in myself, and I believed in the ability to help these young athletes and to help them, be guided in the world in a way that, other people certainly had better credentials to do, but none of them had the hunger that I had. So that's what I applied in those early days.
Yeah, that's crazy dope. So when we think about that hunger, right, I want to kind of pivot and look at your days now currently as a overall sports ecosystem investor, right? It's MSP, correct? And so when we're thinking about that, like, let's talk about one of your latest purchases, that being the Formula One McLaren. Like, can we talk about that? How did you come from sports agent to a baseball owner to now to a whole world of Formula One racing?
Well, it's been quite a ride, but no pun intended. But it's years ago, actually, Tom Garfinkel, who I mentioned earlier, he and I owned a NASCAR team when we were working in Arizona and then ultimately in San Diego. And we finally decided, by the way, that we needed to focus on our day job. So we sold the NASCAR team, who we were also partnered, by the way, with Troy Aikman and Roger Staubach.
Okay.
And it was called Hall of Fame Racing. No
That's
coincidence.
legit. Yeah.
And I learned a bit about motorsports back then. But the fact is, my partner at MSP, named John Najafi, who is the vice chairman of the Phoenix Suns and second largest shareholder there, actually sat on the NBA Board of Governors for 15 years. John and I were friends when I was in Phoenix running the Diamondbacks, and we came back together around Formula One. We actually put a bid in together on a team called Force India, which ended up becoming Racing Point and now is Aston Martin. And we were outbid by Lawrence Stroll by probably 100 million pounds. In our world, you lose them by that much, you walk away happy. So we did. And yet we learned a lot about the Formula One ecosystem, which, had some parallels to NASCAR, but, with all due respect to the France family, kind of a whole different level. And, I guess our appetite was whetted, and we ended up taking a look at Williams when it was available, and then got a call from the Bahrainis, who controlled the McLaren business, the consumer auto business in particular. And they said, listen, would you be interested in getting involved with McLaren and with McLaren Racing? And we said, absolutely. And so, even though their board had authorized them to go hire JP Morgan to find a strategic partner, we got a first shot at it. Wow. And we didn't let go. And so we structured a deal which ended up being, fair and balanced for everybody at the time, and got it done the end of 2020. And I got to tell you, since then I've had more fun in Formula One than anything I've done in my career.
Wow.
San Diego was a great experience. Formula One is a whole different level, and being able to work with a world-class CEO, Zach Brown, who we love, we're there to support him. We serve on his board. We have great partners in our group. We have great partners on the race team. The Bahrainis are terrific. Leadership in the company is amazing. I mean, the racing business alone has almost 900 employees over in London. And, we've expanded it since we got there. We've acquired an IndyCar team, which is now called Aero McLaren. And we have gotten involved with Formula E, the electric version of Formula One, as well as Extreme E.
Pretty cool.
So motorsports has been plentiful over the last year and a half.
Right. I know, being mindful of time here, I just want to make sure I ask you this question because I have to. Especially, you've seen negotiations from all different levels, right? From contracts with players, you're advocating for players, trying to get them as much value as you possibly can, right? To being on the other side of the table as the owner of a team, right? Or even working with the Diamondbacks and negotiating against players and their agents, right? How does that negotiation skill and art transfer into your deal and your deal flow and your investment decisions?
Well, I think I'd start the answer by, people ask me all the time, hey, do you wish you'd gone to business school rather than law school? And my answer is probably. I now teach at a business school, right. So, I've had that experience for 10 years as an adjunct professor at UCLA Anderson. And I always tell the students, like, you're a lot smarter than I am because you chose business school. I didn't. The fact is, law school taught me how to spot issues. And that, for, in terms of a business skill, is really important. Yeah. I'm not saying I see them all. I probably miss a lot. But the ones I see often are ones that others don't. And in that regard, I'm really glad that I have kind of a law school background. That having been said, look, negotiation is really about style, and it's about personal approach and how, look, I was never a guy that banged my fist on the table or yelled and screamed. I got into a yelling match a couple times, but that's all over a long career. Right. I still remember, there was a guy named Bob Wallace, who legendary representative of the Arizona Cardinals. We worked with him even when the Cardinals were in St. Louis. And Bob Wallace and I got into a yelling match once. I almost drove off the San Francisco Bay Bridge. I was so angry. And at the end of it, he said, "You done now?" I go, yeah, I'm done. Let's move on, get it done. Right. Oh my gosh, he worked me up. But look, that was truly unusual because my style was, all about being consistent. About being, level-headed, mindful of the fact that whoever's on the other side, they have a job to do too. And so, I always tried to put myself in the place of that other person and try to relate, somehow. Even though there were times it was a stretch, I tried to understand the arguments that were being made on the other side of the table. So, again, I think style is the most significant differentiator in terms of negotiation. And, look, we did the largest contracts, for various positions. And, when Manny signed, he was the second largest contract in baseball. I mean, it was, Will Clark was the highest paid player in baseball, actually, on a contract that I did back in the early 90s. And, it's like, record setting. Eventually, it doesn't matter. You're just trying to, kind of understand the market and max out, for your particular client. Or if you're on the other side, you're not trying to steal a player. You're trying to get them for the most affordable price.
That's not
And look, you apply that to a reasonable style, and I like to think there's kind of a right way to do business in that world.
So you've owned NASCAR team, Indy team, Formula One. Which league is the best?
Well, look, we had a great experience in NASCAR, and we love our involvement with Roger Penske's IndyCar league at this point. I got to tell you, Formula One's a whole different level. I mean, I said it earlier. I mean it. It's, I don't want to call it the major leagues versus AAA or AA, but I will say that, the global footprint of Formula One is what differentiates. And I've never been involved in a global sport. As a matter of fact, I don't know that there are any other exactly like this. Soccer, football, to the rest of the world is obviously a global sport. But Formula One does, I tell this to people all the time, they have regular season contests, their races, in, on 5 continents. So it's like, that's what differentiates Formula One. The experience has an energy around it, and especially now with, the excitement coming from Netflix, Drive to Survive, and the excitement around, the sport generally. Which, by the way, Liberty Media deserves an incredible amount of credit. Greg Maffei and his leadership have been outstanding in that business because they've allowed the business to blossom. After some very capable leader or ownership over the years, they've taken it to another level. And Drive to Survive has kind of accented that rise, and it's been an incredible ride.
Yeah. So I got one quick question. It sounded like your very first time trying to make a bid for a team, it sounded like it was NHL. That didn't go through. Then you did baseball. You spoke with a gentleman at one point who now sounds like owns the Warriors. So, like, what's next for you? If you were to pick a team right now, which sport would it be? Gun to your head, what sport are you trying to own a team in next or invest in?
Global soccer.
Nice.
Yeah. Maybe the NHL. NHL would be a close second. We believe in hockey. We think Gary Bettman's done an unbelievable job, creating a foundation for that league that I think it's just going to grow from going forward. But global soccer is a bit intriguing the same way that Formula One is to us.
Jeff, can't thank you enough. Can't thank you enough for taking the time. I'm honored that you be on our platform, but also, I mean, you can tell how you talk about passion. You can tell, I mean, again, owner of a sports ecosystem, but an adjunct professor as well too, right? Like that's different, right? Like you have a heart to give and to help and to extend that hand to the next generation. And so I can only imagine as a player what some of your guys got to learn from you throughout your relationship and throughout your time together. So again, I appreciate you for coming on this platform, and good luck with the next team and the next team and the next team. But also, again, really, really appreciate you.
Should we leave them with one difficult question?
Oh,
there you go. Another one.
Not so much difficult, right? One thing we get, right? A lot of people are in different places financially. So if you were speaking to a young college kid coming out of college right now, what would you say, one, maybe is the best industry to go into, or two, what's the best way that would yield them the best return from an investment standpoint?
Yeah, look, I go back to my earlier answer. It's all about what's in your heart. I mean, all I know is sports, so I'm not the right guy to ask. I think sports is a totally fascinating industry at this stage. It's much more mature than when I got involved 35 plus years ago. So today, sports is exciting, and it's got a lot of different opportunities in various forms. That having been said, you got to follow your heart. Doesn't matter what your dad tells you, your mom tells you, doesn't matter what your teachers tell you. You got to look inside your heart and choose something that's going to keep you motivated and excited going forward. That's the key to life, and I think it's really the key to loving what you do. And that's most important.
That's an amazing way to end this off.
No more. I already wrapped this a minute ago, so we all good. Boom. There we go. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, it's
Thank
been
you.
an honor.
Yeah.
It's an honor. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Awesome.